One of the biggest problems in many organizations, even today, is the lack of automation.
How do you create a culture of cybersecurity?
How do you educate the human? In cyber, unless you wholeheartedly believe that you are vulnerable, you can't do the NIST prepare response. You need to be able to determine one key factor, which is, can my staff identify a malicious content? And if you can do that, I think you're ahead of the game, because you can then stand up and say, hello, 75% of my staff are able to clearly identify malicious content.
Welcome to the Executive Connect podcast, where we will explore cutting-edge intersection between AI and cybersecurity. Amar will discuss how AI transforms our defense against complex cyber attacks. Whether you're enhancing your company's cybersecurity measures or keen on the latest digital safety, Amar's insights are your guide to navigating today's dynamic cybersecurity threat landscape. Welcome, Amar.
Greetings, everybody. Melissa, thank you for having me here.
We're so excited to have you here. I read recently in a Google study that 63% of security professionals believe AI will improve corporate security. From your perspective, how can organizations integrate AI in a way that complements their cybersecurity team's strengths?
Wow, we could be here for several hours, so I'm gonna give you sound bites. Even if we keep the age of AI to one side, one of the biggest problems in many organizations, even today, Melissa, is the lack of automation. Now, I say it's not lack of automation, I say is the belief in automation, the fear of automation, right? So AI, I think, is already offering quite a lot, has a lot more to offer. But what may be the biggest roadblock to implementing AI for the benefit of security may be the fear of what AI may do. And to summarize that, the best way to summarize it, the fear of interrupting business, right? If you're an e-commerce business, if you're a high transaction business, if you're a critical national infrastructure business, right? You don't want AI switching off the nuclear reactor just because it's seen something, So I think there are loads of benefits of AI, and we're going to discuss many other challenges and opportunities. But in summary, I think organizations need to embrace AI, but that fear of disruption and interruption by AI is going to be a massive roadblock.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you touched on it. So, just jumping right into the risks of AI. So, from your perspective, are there any, I know there's a lot of risks we hear that's going on right now in the world of cybersecurity, but from your perspective in AI, are there kind of the top potential risks? And, how can companies prepare for some of those risks with using AI tools? Ready to lead smarter and invest wiser? On the Executive Connect podcast, we unpack executive strategies for wealth and influence. Hit the subscribe button now. Don't just watch, act.
Yeah, so I think one of the threat to AI, and this may be a general statement, if I may, I think, but especially in cyber and IT, one of the threats to AI is the lack of available data. Am I making sense? So, ChatGPT and Bard and Copilot are all brilliant because they have access to a lot of data that they are learning from. But now imagine a large organization or a medium-sized organization brings in AI, but they are only monitoring 25% of what they can monitor, if you see what I mean. So you now have the situation where 75% of their data is not being monitored. And then you add to the recipe the complication of privacy, maintaining that privacy of an individual, of staff members, of clients. You add additional pressure on AI not accidentally exposing something, which it might very well do, because we are still quite, yeah, relatively early days of AI. Am I making sense? So the risks of privacy, the risks of not having sufficient learning data of an organization, because it costs a lot to to gather the data and store the data. And then you've got the cost of AI, where you need unlimited CPU, to constantly keep learning. I hope I kind of captured some key risks there.
Yeah, no, no, you make a good point. I talk often about education. I think a lot of times in cybersecurity, a lot of the IT teams I deal with, their job responsibilities used to be very clear. Set up computers, put the ink in the printer, set up the desktops, keep the infrastructure up. And I think as cybersecurity becomes front and center in the world today, and AI, layering in AI tools, I think a lot of times, it's easy to say, oh, well, we had a ransomware attack, it's this administrative assistant's fault, or it's this other marketing person's fault. But you touched a little bit on it, education. It's such an important part. Your employees are your first line of defense. They're the first way in. How do you create a security centric culture where everybody in the organization, whether you're proficient and understand AI tools and cybersecurity, or whether you're in HR and marketing and cybersecurity is not your forte, how do you create a culture of cybersecurity?
Are you a high-income professional looking for smarter ways to protect your wealth? The Texas Freedom Fund gives you the opportunity to invest in energy assets leveraging proven fracking technology and prime access to global markets. With strategic oil and gas investments, you can build real wealth while benefiting from tax advantages under laws dating back to the Reagan era. Take control of your financial future. Visit texasfreedomfund.executiveconnectpodcast.com.
How do you educate the human? It's a bigger question to be, and I think some organizations do it better, but it's also a human problem, if I may. What I mean by that is your staff member has to meet you halfway. So they've got to be interested in learning. But one of the key mantras that I give people is, one of the key KPIs, the performance, if I may, is, can your staff identify something malicious? Am I making sense? Right?
Yep.
Phishing, we can be here 3 years from now, and phishing will still most likely be the biggest entry vector for criminals. So I think education is absolutely key. It's changing the interaction, the ability to automate the gaming, etc. I think different cultures have different challenges, organizational cultures, but unless you can determine, after all of that education, is my staff actually educated, right? You need to be able to determine one key factor, which is, can my staff identify a malicious content, right? And and if you can do that, I think you're ahead of the game, because you can then stand up and say, hello, 75% of my staff are able to clearly identify malicious content.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's great cybersecurity learning tools. And I know from my perspective, I used to get phishing emails where it was abundantly clear that they're phishing emails. Maybe Microsoft was spelled wrong, or the logos were wrong, or it wasn't a complete sentence. Fast forward to all these fantastic AI tools that are out there now. People that, English is not their first language, they can create a phishing email that is harder to spot. I know I've received one recently that looked exactly like me and how I communicate. They had basically taken something I posted on social media, reworded it, and sent it over to me. And even I, working in cybersecurity regularly, I was shocked at how good it looked, and how easy. My first instinct was to think it was real.
And I think, if I may build on that, I think where AI today can add a lot of value is in these kind of, not just for the spammers, if I may, but for us, because AI is adding tremendous value, as you highlight, Melissa, for the the average spammer who has to create really good email. They are now, absolutely, as you've identified, I've seen emails that are absolutely brilliant, right? Um, in terms of the phishing, approach and trying to trick people. But I think on the other side of the fence, organizations should start embracing AI to combat the AI coming in from the other side, if that makes sense. And that's where you would get tremendous value. But I repeat, we speak to different types of clients. The fear of AI, taking over, right? The dare I say, the Terminator Skynet fear, which may be true 5 years from now, etc. But right now, that fear is keeping people away from what AI can absolutely do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we talked a little bit about education and kind of pivoting a little bit. AI is just a tool, right? People are using the tool. And it takes people to use the tool to make them work, just like cybersecurity tools. People have to run tools to scan environments. And so I think I look at it as just another tool for my toolbox and not something to be fearful of, because people need to use the tools that are in their toolbox, and tell the tools what to do. I think also just, kind of switching gears a little bit and talking about third party. Like, I'm also fearful from other third parties now, and how third party risk management is really crucial in organizations now. So managing their vendors as well. So you could have the great, cybersecurity team, you could have great tools. Your people can be trained, but now there's third parties that you're letting into your environment. Can you address a little bit about third-party management?
Wow, that's a full day. I think the third party risk is going to be, probably has always been and will be, and is the biggest Achilles heel, if I may, right, of any organization. And part of that again comes to lack of trust. Organizations saying, okay, here are the documents you want, don't worry, everything's fine. And you know sadly, the few things that you can do with third parties are contractual clauses, right? Now now in the EU and UK, when the GDPR became very popular in the initial days, there was one very interesting clause that was called right to audit, that many people managed to put into their new contracts. I would say you should add right to on-site audit. So if you're dealing with a massive third-party supplier who manages your IT, for example, not just right to audit, but I think you should visit their site to get a feel of who is working there. I think this opens a massive Pandora box, because of working from anywhere after the pandemic. Many third parties are now have allowed their staff members to work from countries that may not be hostile. Sorry, that may be hostile, to the West, and they themselves don't know, because employee now works from Asia, but now moved to a different country in Asia. How do they track that risk of staff working from hostile countries? So if you add all of that, and then you rely on the third party coding your application, supporting your AI data, I think it opens a bigger box to manage than has ever existed.
Yeah, and great points. GDPR is one of the, another framework. There's lots of them in cyber. We've got NIST, we have CMMC now that's come out. We've got new PCI standards. There's a plethora of frameworks to comply with. And if you're in, healthcare, you have HIPAA compliance, and there's other banking compliances. And so I think it's just a lot now for organizations to say, okay, well, we might adopt this framework, but we also have to pay attention to, like you mentioned, GDPR or HIPAA compliance. And so I think it's becoming more tricky to navigate, and layering on again IoT, Internet of Things. How can companies effectively implement strategies for, you know, shifting innovation at IoT, AI, how can they, maybe the better question is, how can they manage that when you layer technology with organizations that may be on-prem and never used IoT devices?
Again, a brilliant question. And I think if you look at it from the digital innovation side, embracing IoT, embracing technology is brilliant. But what most people don't understand, and this may be a problem where many people who are driving digital transformation don't necessarily understand digital, right? They just want digital, right? And I think COVID did a good thing in a way. It forced a lot of digital transformation, if that's one of the good things it did. But right now, I think if you want to embrace IoT, you've got to ask yourselves, how will IoT destroy my business? Am I making sense? Right? So that's the same kind of strategy we use when we do tabletop exercises with clients or whatever. How do we destroy your business? If you can figure that out, and then you can work backwards to try to mitigate those risks. So if you're embracing IoT for whatever reason, that's brilliant. If it's going to help you increase your profits, all of that's brilliant. But you've also, at the same time, as a risk assessment, say, what's the worst case scenario? Will it have a devastating impact in my business, on my business? And then try to mitigate that risk to make sure that you can still IoT, but at least you mitigate those risks.
Yeah, absolutely. It made me, when you said that, it kind of made me chuckle a bit, because I know in the industries that I work, a lot of times the marketing departments, which I love marketing and I love marketing departments, but they'll have grandiose visions of, kiosks or apps or things they want to implement. And the IT departments are like, wait, we need to get involved before we just kind of open things up for you. So I chuckle because, people that are in, the IT as a general term and marketing don't always see eye to eye with these, like you mentioned, what's the worst that can happen, focus there, and then, work backwards. So I think when we look at, cyber threats that are constantly evolving, and they're constantly changing, which would affect not only your brand, but your IoT devices, everything that encompasses an organization. So I think, emerging threats are always on my mind. I'm always concerned about my own personal life and my bank accounts, my home, my things. So is there, how can companies develop resilience against some of these sophisticated cyber attacks?
Yeah, operational resilience, a massive topic. We are kind of specialists in that area. I think the best example, if I may, um, the biggest natural threat in Japan. I want to pick on Japan as a country. It's a beautiful place, but the biggest natural threat in Japan is earthquakes, right? Now, imagine if you and I lived in Japan and we operated an organization there, and we declined any preparation for earthquakes. Am I making sense? Right?
Yep.
Now, I hope everyone listening in and you agree that that would be absolute stupidity, right? Living in Japan, operating in Japan, and saying, nah, what are the chances of an earthquake hitting us? Now, if we take that same logic, if you want to operate in cyberspace, you're gonna be hit by earthquakes in cyberspace. If you don't acknowledge that fact, because we do a very, very popular training called cyber incident planning and response, and we actually do this for clients. One of the biggest learnings, Melissa, is you and I can be sitting here planning for an earthquake, but if you and I and all the other participants don't believe that we are going to be hit by that earthquake, then the planning session is going to be boring and it's not going to be interactive, and the participants are not going to absolutely put their mind to it. So whatever people are doing, if they want operational resilience in cyber, because people are very concerned about flooding, building not being available, that's all where humans can, I mean, even non-technical humans can understand, oops, my building will not be available, so I better plan for that. I think when it comes to cyber, many non-technical people, and sometimes, dare I say, techies, are guilty of, either techies are guilty of over trusting technology, and non-techies are guilty of, I've given you $1 million, why should I be attacked? Right? Now, they're not going to say that in Japan, because they're going to invest that $1 million, but still understand that there will be an earthquake and the building might be saved, but they still need to prepare. Am I making sense? Right? But in cyber, unless you wholeheartedly believe that you are vulnerable, you can't do the NIST prepare response, right? Because you believe that nothing shall happen to me if I put enough money in it.
Right. Yeah.
Am I making sense?
Yeah, absolutely. You also made me think when you were saying that. I was with a friend of mine this week, and they were saying, I have 6 credit monitoring subscriptions now because 6 separate companies that were just attacked had hit them from healthcare to their banking. So 6 of them in a less than 90-day period. And so I'm thinking from their perspective, you know, they sent this individual an email that said, clean up your password. That's going to fix it. And, so I think of all these, it's a good point that, you don't want to set up shop in a place that's, has earthquakes, has a lot of these challenges. But you also don't want to set up shop in a way that you're not clear, like you mentioned, with what your goals are, right? What are we trying to protect? How are we going to protect it? I also think about, you mentioned a little bit about GDPR, like transparency in people's data. So I'm kind of touching on a lot of different points here, but I think of like my data with, the companies that I do business with personally, and I'm concerned, right? I'm concerned that, yes, I've got great password hygiene, I've got, but they have my data either way, where I live, what my social is, when my birthday is, all my private data. So no matter how great my password is and how I'm using their mobile app, they still have my information. And how can I, as a user of these products, whether it be banking products or healthcare products, how can I, as an end consumer, feel safe putting in my information into these IoT mobile device apps or websites? How can I feel safe? So from your perspective, maybe the question is, everybody always says robust passwords the way, and I kind of chuckle because it's not just passwords, it's understanding where your data is going and how it's being used as well. So maybe, I don't know if you have any thoughts kind of following up with kind of like password protection / security of people's information.
Wow, this is a really very good question again. I think quick takeaways. One, everybody should be using a password manager, right? That's, I think, a baseline. Whether you're technical or not, it doesn't bother. In my opinion, everyone should have access to a password manager. That's number one. Number two, the recipe, in my professional opinion, is a very simple recipe for passwords, easy to remember, difficult to guess, right? Okay. And the problem with historical password, uh, education was super complex password with 20 characters, ABC 123 exclamation mark ampersand. Who's going to remember that, right? So in the end, that broke the principle where it was easy to guess and actually difficult to remember, the other way around. So for everyone listening in, I think, one, you need to get a password manager, because the good news, Melissa, as you know, majority of password managers these days are warning users that it's a weak password, that their password has been breached on, this particular website, etc., etc. So that is making people more secure because it's in their face. The password manager, I'm not going to name any particular brands, but majority of them informing the user, don't use this password because it's too easy to guess, etc. So is difficult to guess, but very easy for someone. And the best way and the best advice today is use 3 or 4 passphrases, 3 or 4 words as your password. So, if you like Harry Potter books, for example, or any book that you like to read, remember page 54, paragraph 1, and take 5 words or 3 words from that paragraph 1.
Well, that's a good idea. I think I'll use that, Amar. It's really great. Really great idea. Mine are long, but not that long, so I probably need to tighten them up. One thing I hear a lot in cybersecurity from people I work with is how expensive cybersecurity is now in all industries and all spaces. And a lot of times people will say, well, we're a non-revenue generating department. We're not like the marketing department that's doing this or the sales department that's bringing in business. We're just IT. So can you help me just from a ROI perspective, how do you talk to your clients from an ROI perspective and looking at cybersecurity as an investment versus a cost?
Very, very good question. I think we've got to break it down into 2 buckets, if I may. One is practical security, and then, as we discussed earlier, the other is about monitoring, detection, and response, right? So let's look at it from the practical angle. I think there is the 2 frameworks, if I may. One of them is the UK's framework called Cyber Essentials. It's a very, very tiny framework of 5 controls. The other one I really like is the US. You must have obviously heard about it, the Center for Internet Security. It used to be called SANS 20, but now it's CIS. And I think there are now 18 controls, right? Now, we work with a lot of clients. And if you look at CIS 18, for the majority of those controls, you can do a lot of good things without significant investment. Am I making sense with that, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Because one of the fallacies in techie and non-techie minds is, if I throw enough money at cyber, we won't be hit by the earthquake, right? Which is a fallacy. So if you take a step back, don't throw any money at what you have, but actually take a practical approach, similar. And I think, if I may introduce one soundbite, to me, this is probably the most soundbite: no access, no hack. Now, what does that mean? That means if you can control access or access control, right? Who has access to what and who can do what? It may be a boring topic in the grand scheme of next generation AI, etc., etc. However, majority of advanced criminals, even nation states, in most of their attacks require privileged access, right? Now, yes, they require unpatched software. I agree. But if you follow a life cycle of an attack, for the non-technical people listening in and for the techies, if you can control access and limit access, you are significantly, at a very low cost, increasing your protection. Number one. Number two, everyone's heard about it, 2-factor authentication. Now, many people will say, yeah, we have switched it on, but they need to ask one question in the organization. If an administrator, Melissa, switched off 2FA, would they know? Seems like a very simple question, but and let's assume the administrator is he or she or they are non-malicious, but they may accidentally switch off the 2-factor across the organization because they can't get their work done. So they may have done it accidentally. It goes back into that question: would you know if someone switched that off? Why am I bringing these 2 topics here? Because, as similar to what you're saying, for an immediate ROI, right? this practical approach of no access, no hack, and when would you know, or would you know, if someone from the administrator side, the system admin, the techie, switched off to FA, two-factor authentication, because they wanted to get their job done? If these two can give you, without significant investment, significant return, because you are controlling who can do what.
I love it. That's a really good piece of advice. I love it. That's spot on, and
You're still
I
recording.
absolutely agree. I think, yep, yeah. I think that the other thing too, I think low hanging fruit is education. Basic, like, what are we clicking on? Like, and just, companies shouldn't be sending out some of the emails that they're sending out now, offering free Starbucks or those kind of things. If you can't control it and people are clicking on everything, you need to get like a report card, right? Okay, we did a phishing exercise and we have 100 employees and 85 of your 100 employees clicked on something. We have a problem,
Can
right?
I add to this, Melissa? Sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt you.
yeah, definitely.
Here's another really interesting and important soundbite. Because humans are humans, and we are going to do what you're saying, because I put my hands up. I'm, although I am like yourself more paranoid, I may fall for a phishing email. I think the key is, can I admit to you? Can I phone the boss and say, hey boss, I made a mistake? Because I can only do that if I can identify. Am I making sense? So
Yep.
identify and admit is that soundbite I regularly tell my customers. You need to encourage, one, your staff needs to be able to, oops, I fell for this. But they also then need to be able to either hit the report button or admit by email or phone saying, hey boss, last Friday I was really tired, or I was at the pub and I opened an Excel macro that rebooted my laptop. I mean, that's gold dust, you know. But the question is, are your staff encouraged to own up?
That's a fantastic point, because you're right. It made me chuckle again because I have done that myself or clicked on something or but I think it's you make a great point is creating a culture where it's okay to make mistakes because we're all human, and bringing it forward so we can fix the problem instead of scared and sweeping it kind of under the rug. Because when we do that, that's when the big problems happen and people get into our environment and they sit for days, weeks, months, and they learn what's going on in our environment. Then they make decisions. So I think that's a really, really good point. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, what are the top things that are low hanging fruits for companies that don't cost anything that they can do? We've just given a few of them, right? That they can low hanging fruit, creating a culture where they're able to bring that forward, or they're leveraging a managed security services company where they forward that over. They look at it, contain it, clean it up, make sure nobody else clicked on it, and they investigate it. And I think the sooner that you can have your people feel safe, like you mentioned, to forward, whoops, I made a mistake, the sooner your organization can fix it and get the smart people on the phone to figure out what happened, if anything.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so just couple final things. I know you mentioned some really good tips and tricks. Anything else from your mind, maybe that we haven't discussed that companies across many different sectors can focus on that's low hanging fruit from a cybersecurity and AI perspective? Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Related to access control, and I know this term has been used or abused by marketing companies and agencies. Zero trust, right? You don't. Okay, and the problem with zero trust is, again, it's one of those things. Would you challenge someone who has worked at your organization every day for 10 years? In the zero trust culture, you would, right? Because if that individual didn't bring his or her pass, they shouldn't be able to enter the organization. As an example, it's fairly you don't need great technology. It's more of a cultural, organizational cultural, and human cultural uh, issue. But if you can, that's when again, it relates to access control, isn't it? Because imagine me telling you, hey, Melissa, I just need access to the AD. It's a Friday evening. You go, yeah, I know Amar. I'm going to give him access. Right? Instead of saying, whoa, Friday, why do you need access, Amar? Where's the change control? Blah, blah, blah. It's that if you can implement it, again, the ROI on this is because it just simply makes it really difficult to then succeed in an attack. I think that's one of those this things. But yeah, the other one is look at CIS 18. I absolutely love that. A lot of what CIS 18 can be done on the cheap. It's again more of a are we willing to say, no to someone? Are we willing to tighten access control? Are we willing to remove unwanted apps? For example, Melissa, you know, are we willing to say for corporate people that they cannot install apps without their permission? It's this balance of everyone wants to be very digital and modern, but then again, at the same time, you'll be asking them to be more restrictive, which dare I say, the younger folks may find very irritating. But I think if I may just close this, the benefit is if someone is not allowed to work, CNN or BBC from their website, most people have a separate smartphone or tablet that they can use it on. So that, again, very simple process of why do you need this website? Go and surf it on your own phone.
Yeah, and you make another really fantastic point is if you're not sure in the IT department and you don't know and something seems off, ask and get your employees on the phone. Ask them, why are you doing this? Or why are you putting a USB key at 12 o'clock at night in your computer and offloading all your files? If that's happening, that's a problem, right? And ask the person. And maybe the person's like, hey, Amar, I'm presenting next tomorrow. I need to get these PowerPoints on this USB stick because they need it that way. And they're like, okay, makes sense.
Yeah,
but ask, right? Because it could be the other way. They could be doing things, not for the right reasons. And so I think you make a really good point. I always say, trust but verify, and the industry is trust your people, but verify when things aren't up to the sniff test, and ask. And because at the end of the day, I know I spend a lot of my time in the sales, marketing, strategy kind of role, and so I'm not a delivery person in my career. But a lot of times people have asked me, hey, Melissa, what about this? And I'm like, oh, it's this. But they've asked, and I've been able to explain. So I think you nailed it. Ask and wonder.
On the AI front, if I may, I just had thought one more thing. One of the challenges with AI right now is, and this is not an accusation at any company, but I can confidently say everyone's now saying their product is AI. Right? And it may well not be AI or true AI like ChatGPT or Bard or Copilot, right? So this again then creates this snake oil industry where as long as you say AI, your product will be sold, but the end user may not actually see the benefit, and that itself then reduces the trust on what could be true AI.
Yeah, in AI is the buzzword right now. Everybody's in AI, and even in cybersecurity, everybody's in cybersecurity and AI right now because they're the popular topics, the shiny things. And if we're 5 years from now, we look back and there's going to be a lot of convergence in that space, and some will survive, others won't. I think of it similar to the rise of, tech companies and which ones are still standing and which ones are acquiring the others. And so I agree. I think it's the popular shiny thing now is we're secure and we're using AI. So I think everybody's kind of using that now. But companies like Microsoft, like you mentioned, Copilot and ChatGPT. There's a lot of companies that are embedding some of these tools into their products. So I think it's great to use them. But yeah, you make a good point. Any final thoughts before we close? I really appreciate you being on Executive Connect. Anything, maybe top 3 things you want to share with the listeners before we close?
Yeah, I mean, I can easily do that. Thank you so much for having me here. I think one, as we said earlier, is access. You know, it's a very good return on investment, and you can do a lot of it on the cheap. Who has access? Restrict access. The second point I would say is you have to admit that your organization will be attacked. I know I don't normally say will, but the likelihood is very high. So you've got to focus on not just protecting or building a wall, but actually how would you detect and respond and recover. So those are kind of things I would say. And like I said, settle yourself on something like CIS 18, for example, and then very popular international framework, and try to map and align yourself. Dare I say, and I know I'm going to go on record here, ISO, the standards are too onerous. I think CIS 18 is probably the best, most, and NIST obviously, but CIS 18 as a control framework, I think for many organizations is very useful.
That's great. Thank you so much for being here today, Omar. I know you're a busy man, and that's the Executive Connect podcast.